January 14th, 1999, 14:30 hours, King Street West, Toronto. Lieutenant Colonel John Dunn stood in the commander's hatch of a Bison armoured personnel carrier, 8-wheeled military vehicle rumbling through Canada's largest city. Not toward a combat zone, not toward a natural disaster site, toward a snow-buried streetcar stop where 3 elderly women had been waiting for 40 minutes in -15-degree wind chill. The scene was absurd. Military vehicles designed for peacekeeping missions in Bosnia now navigating Toronto's financial district. Soldiers trained for combat carrying snow shovels instead of rifles. The entire operation commanded from Canadian Forces Base Downsview, not because of war or terrorism, but because it had snowed. A lot. By this Thursday afternoon, 118 centimetres had fallen on Toronto in just 14 days. And Canada was watching, most of it laughing. The trouble started innocuously enough. January 2nd, 1999, a Saturday. Environment Canada meteorologist Ella Ross warned viewers that evening of a storm system moving up from the United States. Very cold air from the north colliding with warm air from the south. The combination, she explained, would create something powerful. She was right. By Sunday morning, 47 centimetres blanketed the city. 47 centimetres in a single night. Toronto Pearson Airport reported the highest daily snowfall total in its recorded history. Yonge Street's bright lights, the ones that usually cut through winter darkness, disappeared into blowing white. The city mobilized. More than 1,800 workers hit the streets. 800 vehicles, including 5 industrial snowmelters, worked around the clock. Salt and sand trucks made endless loops. The financial cost mounted immediately. Within one weekend, the city had burned through 25% of its annual snow removal budget. Then the following weekend brought another 10 to 15 centimetres. Side streets became impassable. The snow didn't melt. Temperatures stayed brutal. Toronto residents dug out their driveways, cleared their sidewalks, and waited for the city crews to make the streets navigable again. The crews couldn't keep up. Tuesday, January 12th. Mayor Mel Lastman sat in his office fielding complaints. The residential streets remained buried. People were calling about ambulances that couldn't reach medical emergencies, fire trucks stuck 3 blocks from house fires, buses unable to complete their routes. Someone on his staff suggested they might need to consider requesting military assistance. Lastman dismissed the idea. This was Toronto. Cities across Canada dealt with worse snow every winter. Montreal, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Edmonton, they'd never needed the army to shovel their streets. The suggestion seemed ridiculous. That evening, Lastman mentioned the mounting crisis to his wife. Her response was immediate. Call in the army. Wednesday morning, January 13th, Lastman called for his driver. Take me through the streets of Toronto. Not the main arteries where plows had been working continuously, the residential neighbourhoods where normal people lived, where families needed emergency services to be able to reach them. What he saw changed everything. Cars parked on both sides of the street, snow piled high between them. In the middle, 2 narrow ruts where some brave soul had attempted to drive through. Nothing else. No room for an ambulance, no space for a fire truck, just 2 tire tracks and walls of white. Lastman returned to his office and made the call to Art Eggleton, Federal Defence Minister and former Toronto Mayor. The request must have been uncomfortable, but Eggleton understood. The military had been deployed for emergencies across Canada before. Floods, ice storms, forest fires. This qualified. By that afternoon, the order went out to Canadian Forces Base Petawawa, 350 kilometres northwest of Toronto. 400 troops prepared to deploy. Another 800 stood by on standby. Thursday, January 14th. As another storm system began dumping snow on the city, the convoy from Petawawa rolled into CFB Downsview. 400 soldiers, Bison armoured personnel carriers, heavy equipment, all of it mobilized not for peacekeeping or disaster relief, but for snow removal in Canada's largest city. The optics were spectacular, and spectacularly bad. CBC reporter Adrienne Arsenault stood on a downtown street that evening, snow falling behind her, and delivered the news. Toronto, the windy, the frigid, and tonight, the abandoned. The National opened its broadcast with a stark assessment. Tonight, the army moves in. Another blizzard hits southern Ontario, and Toronto just can't cope. The troops fanned out across the city. Their primary mission? Clear catch basins to prevent flooding when the snow eventually melted. Shovel around fire hydrants so firefighters could access them. Clear sidewalks at bus stops and streetcar stops. Make emergency routes passable. The bison vehicles proved unexpectedly useful. Those 8-wheeled armored carriers, designed to navigate combat zones, could go anywhere. When ambulances couldn't reach patients, the bisons served as emergency medical transport. Before the operation ended, they would evacuate 35 people to hospitals through streets no civilian vehicle could navigate. In an interview with Peter Mansbridge, Lastman defended the decision. His biggest concern wasn't the current snow, it was what would happen when it melted. All that water, all those blocked catch basins, the potential for massive flooding. They're fantastic, those things go, when no car can go, he said about the bisons, his enthusiasm genuine, if slightly defensive. More than 300 local reservists joined the effort, soldiers who lived in Toronto, who knew these streets, who understood that, while this might look ridiculous to the rest of Canada, the situation was genuinely serious. The Royal Regiment of Canada trudged through downtown with shovels, clearing one bus shelter at a time, making the city functional again, piece by piece. The rest of Canada watched with undisguised glee. Headlines across the country competed for the most cutting assessment. Mayor Mel dials 911, jeered Vancouver's The Province. Time equals 650 milliseconds greater than Vancouver, where snow causes chaos with just a few centimeters, because the city's infrastructure isn't built for it, somehow felt entitled to mock. The Ottawa citizen was more subtle but equally sharp. Embarrassed Toronto struggles while rest of country hides a smile. Not even hiding it, really. The smile was there for everyone to see. Then Prince Edward Island's government called. The entire province, population barely 140,000, offered to send equipment and expertise to help Toronto, population 2.5 million, deal with snow. I saw on CTV just the extent of the snow that Toronto had received, Mike Curry, PEI's Minister of Transportation, recalled. I had discussions with some staff here, and by the evening I contacted Toronto and said, if you want, we'll put together a team. The offer was sincere. Curry genuinely wanted to help, felt bad about the mockery being directed at Toronto. But the very fact that tiny Prince Edward Island felt equipped to rescue Canada's largest city only amplified the embarrassment. Social commentary came from unexpected sources. One Toronto resident, interviewed while shoveling his driveway, captured the national mood perfectly. I've seen worse in Montreal. I can't believe this city can't get it together. The cognitive dissonance was real. Time equals 650 milliseconds / yes, 118 centimeters in 2 weeks was exceptional. Yes, the infrastructure wasn't designed for that volume. But other Canadian cities managed worse every winter without military intervention. The optics of soldiers with shovels, armored vehicles navigating Bay Street, the mayor riding in what looked like a tank, it was too perfect. Toronto the good, Toronto the smug, Toronto the center of the universe, reduced to begging the army for help with snow. Friday, January 15th. Lastman toured Downsview Base to meet the troops. He climbed into a bison, had what he later described as a little fun, riding around in the military vehicle that had become the symbol of his controversial decision. By that afternoon, he stood before reporters with a different message. I'm not prepared to declare an emergency because everything is well under control. The worst was over. No more military assistance would be needed. The troops had helped clear the critical infrastructure. catch basins, fire hydrants, emergency routes. The predicted additional snow hadn't materialized. The 26.6 centimeters that fell Thursday was substantial but manageable, much less than the catastrophic amounts forecasters had warned about. The soldiers packed up their shovels and returned to Petawawa. The bisons rolled back out of the city. Within days, Toronto began returning to normal. Transit resumed full service. Streets became passable. The snow melters continued their work. Life returned to the regular rhythm of winter in a major Canadian city. The financial damage was severe. Snow removal for January 1999 cost $70 million, more than twice the entire annual budget for the whole year. By month's end, 145 centimeters total had accumulated, making it the snowiest January in Toronto's recorded history, possibly in 2 centuries. Years later, Mel Lastman never expressed regret. In a 2019 interview, 20 years after the decision, he remained convinced. "I know I did the right thing, and if you know you did the right thing, nothing can bother you." The evidence supported him. Those 35 people evacuated to hospitals in bisons, the fire hydrants that could actually be accessed, the catch basins cleared before the melt, the residential streets made passable, not for convenience, but for basic emergency services. Art Eggleton, who authorized the deployment, later contextualized it. "I don't think people who have ridiculed this measure have understood that this was an extraordinary circumstance. Time equals 550 milliseconds greater than. It had the potential to be as disastrous in a Toronto context as the ice storm would have been for eastern Ontario and western Quebec." But the mockery endured. Lastman himself acknowledged it had become his defining legacy as mayor. "I was in a taxi the other day," he recounted in 2019. "The taxi driver says, 'I came the year you brought in the army.' It was really funny. It happens to me all the time now." Even decades later, whenever Toronto experiences significant snow, the question resurfaces. Will they call in the army again? In January 2026, when another major storm dumped 56 centimeters on the city in a single day, Mayor Olivia Chow joked to reporters, "I don't think we need to bring in the army." The reference was immediate, understood by everyone, still carrying its weight of gentle mockery mixed with grudging respect. What Toronto learned in January 1999 wasn't about snow removal or emergency response. It was about perception, about how a necessary decision can become a punchline, about how doing the right thing for the right reasons doesn't protect you from ridicule when the optics are wrong. Those soldiers, with their shovels, clearing bus stops one by one, probably prevented deaths. Those bison armored vehicles navigating impassable residential streets certainly saved lives. The $70 million price tag was steep, but how do you calculate the value of accessible emergency services, of elderly residents who could get to hospitals, of fires that could actually be fought? You can't. But you can laugh at tanks in downtown Toronto, and Canada did. January 14, 1999. A military convoy responding to a snow emergency in the nation's largest city. 400 troops deployed, not against an enemy, but against white stuff falling from the sky. It remains one of the strangest military operations in Canadian history, also one of the most practical. The snow eventually melted, the mockery didn't. But the streets got cleared, the hydrants got shoveled, and the city functioned through the snowiest January in 200 years. Sometimes, the right decision is also the ridiculous one. Toronto learned to live with both.